Well, good morning or afternoon or evening, depending on where you're dialing in from. My name is Adam Beck. I'm Executive Director of the Smart Cities Council here in Australia and New Zealand, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our 7th and final data dialogue for 2020. What a year it has been, and we're finishing off our data dialogues for the year, focusing in on 5G, but more importantly, the data dividend that comes with this new technology. And I've got a fantastic panel joining me of guests today who are going to help us unpack this idea of the 5G data dividend, and we'll be introducing them in a moment. Just a few housekeeping issues. We'd really encourage you to use the question box today. That functionality you have, please put your questions in there, address them either directly to any of our guests or indeed an open question to anyone. We certainly welcome those. For those of you that may think after the webinar, it's worthwhile sharing with others, or you thought that there may be a colleague or peer that may be interested, you'll be able to access a recording of this session this time tomorrow. If you head to our YouTube channel, we're on there, Smart Cities Council, Australia, New Zealand, you'll find us. This series of data dialogues is part of our data leadership initiative at the Smart Cities Council. We launched the Centre for Data Leadership earlier this year in January. That's giving us a little bit of bandwidth and opportunity to be a little bit biased and talk everything data, which is of course one part of the broader Smart Cities agenda. So I encourage anyone who wants to see a little bit more about our work with respect to data leadership to head to a website, centrefordataleadership.com. We've also got a number of our resources on there as well, including our 5 data leadership vitals, our data leadership vitals readiness questions for cities, and also a range of webinars, and also our guidance note for privacy impact assessment that Nicole indeed was a key author of. This data dialogue is part of the broader Smart Cities Week programming that's been happening since April this year. This is indeed the last and final session of Smart Cities Week Australia New Zealand 2020. There is Digital Twin Week going on in parallel just this week, which also aligns with Smart Cities Week. But it's been a fantastic 8 months with a lot of content, and indeed, if you go to that YouTube channel, you'll see all of the recordings of around about 20+ sessions. Not only all of our data dialogues, but a whole range of other sessions as well. Digital Twin Week 2020, as I mentioned, is about a day and a half old at the moment. We still have around about 10 sessions between now and Friday. If you head to digitaltwinweek.com, you'll see the full program. Our guests today, let's jump into this. Catherine Hill from the City of Melbourne, Robert Lindstell from Vertiv. We've got Chris Althaus from AMTA, Nicole Stevenson from Ground Up Consulting, Graham Woodward coming to us live from the University of Canterbury over in New Zealand. And representing our sponsor today, Jason Robney from Telstra. I'd like to send a special thank you to Telstra for allowing to make this session happen. And you'll hear from our guests in a moment, giving a brief introduction when we jump into our opening statements. As I mentioned, my goal and the brief that I've given our guests today is to try and focus as much as possible on data and 5G. We've certainly heard a lot about technology, deployments, small cells. There's been a lot going on in the public sort of popular media around 5G, good, bad, and in between. I'm very optimistic. The Smart Cities Council is a big advocate for 5G as a new generation of technology. It is not just a faster 4G, but with certainly a whole range of fundamental changes and differences in terms of what the 5G technology brings. We believe, if anything, it's going to bring significant value when we talk about data, and that's really what we want to focus in today. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to start with some opening statements. 2 minutes. I'd like to keep our guests nice and tight. I've asked them to complete a sentence, and the sentence is, 5G means that data, fill in the blank. So we're going to hear a first round of opening statements from all of our guests, and then we're going to jump into sort of more of a dialogue after that, and of course building off the questions that our audience put into the question box. So in terms of our opening statements, let's head straight over to the University of Canterbury. Graham Woodward, thank you so much for joining us. Over to you for your opening statement, but also if you could kick off with an introduction, who you are and what you do. Thank you.
Sure, everyone. Thank you, Adam. Yeah, so I'm the key representative here, although I was born and raised in Sydney with a PhD from the University of Sydney. In fact, my PhD was sponsored by Telstra, so another sort of shout out to Telstra. Thank you for that. So now I'm a dual national. I'm research leader of the Wireless Research Centre at the University of Canterbury in Christchurch, New Zealand. So we're an industry-facing research centre working with local and international organisations in wireless and adjacent technologies. Prior to that, I had about 20 or so years in industry, including Alcatel Australia, Bell Labs Australia, and the research manager of Toshiba's European Telecommunications Research Lab in Bristol. So much of that time spent on silicon designs for 3G and 4G systems, and now working on 5G and starting to uncover what 6G might bring. Okay, so 5G means that data will be ubiquitous with massive interconnectivity. There's predictions of up to 1 million devices connected per square kilometre. And many of these devices will be machine-type communications, so quite different to what we're dealing with at the moment. So things like the car talking to other cars, car talking to street lights connected to sensors for smart lighting, garbage bins connected, interconnection with building information systems. So there's going to be a massive amount of interconnectivity. It also means that data latency, 5G also means that data latency will be decreased, which opens up a raft of real-time mission-critical applications, such as monitoring and control of city assets, utilities, emergency services, again, autonomous vehicles, and new applications like mixed reality, augmented reality, where you mix the real world with computer graphics, and if you don't do it right, you get seasick. You've got low latencies, really, really important there. And of course, comes with high data rates. So bringing them all together will enable a lot of distributed intelligence, edge processing, computing on the cloud, and 5G will enable a whole lot of applications previously we only sort of dreamed of because we didn't have the capabilities, and no doubt will also bring a whole lot of applications we haven't even thought of yet until we start experimenting with it and start using it.
Graham, thanks so much from that, and your point there around video and movie making. Of course, New Zealand is globally famous, and its talent being exported around the world is something that many certainly admire. So, Graham, thanks for that opening statement. Robert, over to you, my friend. Who are you? What do you do? And the response to the opening question. Thank you.
Sure. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Robert Lindstell. I'm the Managing Director for Vertiv. I look after the Australia-New Zealand area. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm actually originally from England, and I've worked in Europe and also the US in multiple technology, generally senior technology roles on the general management side, but I also have been a technologist. I've worked in semiconductors, printed circuit boards, specialized coatings, before I moved over here, and so I'm used to working with some of the big companies. Some of them don't exist so much anymore, but you go from the Motorola's, Intels, Nokia's, Ericsson's, particularly when I was working overseas, to over here where I've moved into the data center world. So Vertiv is a $4.5–5 billion US based company, and we are about 20,000 people globally. We operate in multiple countries, and our main solution set is about keeping businesses running with their data setup. So, for instance, data centers in the world of telco, keeping the the towers running. We have 3G, 2G, 3G, 4G offerings. Micro data centers is a new area which we'll probably get into a little bit later on. But anywhere where you need to have power backed up or keeping the equipment cool is our expertise. So we're one of those sort of silent partners in a lot of ways. We used to be called Emerson. We have competitors that also have some degree of being known, but we're not like Frontline, like Telstra as a name over here is ubiquitous. Amazon over here is a ubiquitous name. So you may or may not have heard of us, but we're behind just about every major company's data center around the world. So you only need to take the top 5 cloud providers, and we've got some kind of asset sat in there. To answer the question that Adam has set us, so with 5G, what we see it as is it's providing mobility to the data-hungry applications, such that decision making and big compute, particularly where AI is being used, can be operated at a locality as against maybe a cloud-based centralized system, or requiring assets to be distributed and heavily looked after. You can actually use 5G to enable that much more effectively than our current systems. I'll leave it at that for now. No doubt we'll talk later.
Thank you, Robert. Chris, over to you. Thank you. Who are you? What do you do? And can you complete the sentence, 5G means that data blank? Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Adam. Chris Althaus. I'm Chief Executive of the Australian Mobile Telecommunications Association. So we're the industry group that represents the sector in total. So obviously that means the mobile network operators, the infrastructure vendors, and into the handset community, and a range of other business groups that sort of relate to mobile. Our work is divided probably into 3 primary blocks. We deal a lot with the policy environment and the regulatory settings. We're also heavily focused on mobile infrastructure, both spectrum and networks, and thirdly, and increasingly, a substantial investment in product stewardship and environmental programs, which is perhaps our third dominant tranche. My background is I've been in this role for 12 years, but not a native of telco, and not a native of anywhere, as it turns out. I had some half a decade in transport and logistics, and prior to that in forest products. But all with a focus on policy and national representation and advocacy of industries. But I'd have to say, having joined this sector just as we were launching 3G, it's by far and away been the wildest ride. I feel very pleased to be part of such an esteemed panel today, not the least of which because I'm sure I'll learn much more than I can contribute. But Adam, to your question, 5G means that data and opportunities for use of data analytics and AI will be maximised as key enablers of Industry 4.0 agendas. The glue in this equation is the network, both fixed and mobile, but of course, as Robert's just pointed out, there's an insatiable appetite for mobility, both at enterprise and consumer levels, and of course that demand is driving an enormous new round of investment as 5G takes shape around the world, and not the least of which in Australia. And the implications of all of this go to the productivity question now more than ever. In a world where we're dominated by COVID recovery strategies, the focus on productivity, given the plight of population and workplace participation as the 3 cornerstones of economic growth, the pressure there is leading us to turn to what will be a substantially technology-driven recovery. Now, AMP is in the middle of this macro equation. We're all about getting that productivity impact to reality and to fruition. And the opportunities are enormous no matter what sector you look at, most particularly in this area of smart cities. Efficiencies to be gained depending on a great deal of partnership, not the least of which with all three tiers of government. And this is where our focus lies, to try and enable all of this to come together in the most efficient way. Thanks, Adam.
Chris, thanks so much for that introduction. Jason, let's head to you. A sort of intro. Who are you? What do you do? And if you could address the opening statement question, that would be delightful. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Well, I'm Jason Romney, Head of Smart City Strategy at Telstra. So I think a lot about 5G. And I think 5G means that data will be available to do many things that cities care about. There's post-COVID recovery, getting people back to their offices safely, reviving retailers and restaurants, arts and sport. They want their buzz back. So 5G really takes any IoT and analytics to the next level. It moves a city from apps and portals to immersion. It moves a city from data points about, full bins to the profusion of data that comes from, say, controlling entire fleets of 8K video capturing precision drones. And 5G also serves the people. You will have seen the iPhone 12 launch this week, where you can really share in just a heartbeat the incredible resolution of Dolby video or an entire volumetric LiDAR model. The 5G data comes in at gigabit speed and goes up at hundreds of megabits per second. So 5G really sort of untethers the digital twin, and twins will just pop up anywhere that they're needed. That'll distribute collaboration and scenario modeling right across the city. The city maintenance worker will use it to fix something. The first responder will check it en route to an emergency. It'll improve real-time supply chains. The ambulance will upload a twin of your broken body before you even hit the hospital. City workers will know that their work desk is virus-free. And downstairs, they'll find new kinds of retail experiences with augmented reality product tours and that kind of thing. And of course, in transport, 5G really delivers. That's where, as you've heard, it's critical. Great for vulnerable road users like pedestrians and cyclists, giving those real-time alerts about potential dangers, remote control of vehicles. Moving vehicles with 5G can soak up huge digital maps and software updates that you'll need for Teslas and things. And robotic sensors make the whole construction industry safer, faster, and less costly. And industrial IoT enables, advanced manufacturing like we need at Fisherman's Bend or Western Sydney. And things like volumetric capture, an entirely new tool to digitize people. That's going to let sports fans participate in e-sport, that kind of thing. So whole new business models are created here as well, an important aspect. But look, all this needs the right slices of network. And 5G uses city data to critically train artificial intelligence for that purpose. So that's a kind of adaptive network, I guess, that reshapes for your particular task. And just overall, 5G gives you the speed. As you've heard, there are the snappier responses, and really you can serve more devices at once in a given area. And that's absolutely vital to a city digital twin. And it's happening right now, right across the country.
Jason, thank you for that great introduction, and we'll certainly unpack some of those issues. Nicole Stevenson, I'm going to head to you next. Who are you? What do you do? What is your response to the question 5G means that data blank? Over to you.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Nicole Stevenson, and I guess keeping with the theme of this sort of international panel, I'm an expat Canadian, and I've been living here in the Brisbane area since 2003. I'm a privacy specialist, and my focus is on mainly IoT for smart cities and critical infrastructure. So here in Australia, I do tend to spend a lot of time with our local governments unpacking privacy issues that are associated with their technology programs. It's really interesting stuff. and wonderful in many ways to see technology being leveraged for the benefit of the community. And while I do come in as the voice of reason, I certainly don't feel that privacy is a showstopper for our technology projects or new technologies generally. In fact, I think it's an opportunity to innovate in a way that serves the community and serves their expectations and builds trust between our governments and the community. So this is the focus that I take in my work. And so when asked to come on the panel today and to think about Adam's question, I think 5G means that we have an increased opportunity for our novel data-driven applications and projects. And I think this is a great thing. I do think, though, that we must remember that these data-driven projects and applications, they involve a particular kind of data in most cases, and that is personal data or the personal information of you and of me. And because of this, because of that type and often granularity of the data, it's really important that we stay on top of our privacy program management, particularly in our cities, and that we understand the data that we need before we rush headlong into a project, whether, whatever the technology is. In this case, we're talking about projects that are enabled by 5G, but, this statement rings true for any project. And then we need to manage that data in accordance with privacy laws that are in place here in Australia, whether at the federal level or at the state and territory level, and also in the context of our community's expectations. Thanks, Adam.
Nicole, thank you. And certainly looking forward to getting your views throughout this dialogue today. Last but not least, Catherine Hill, City of Melbourne. Catherine, welcome you to give an introduction, who you are, what you do, and then of course a response to the statement question that we've set. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Good morning, everybody. A real privilege to be part of this amazing panel this morning and listening to you all. I work at the City of Melbourne and lead the Digital Urban Infrastructure Program, which is confusing to some, but basically we develop and look at emerging tech to improve our use of real-time data in the city. And our whole goal
Perfect timing. Perfect timing, Catherine.
The dog has not made any noise. The dog has not made any noise while you've all been talking. I'm so sorry. I'll just continue. At least there's no children at home today. It's just the third fluffy child.
It's your squad.
So we are, our team's very focused on improving digital efficiency within council using real-time data, but also digitally enabling the city, and 5G is quite crucial to that, of course. I have a background in software and information management and have done lots and lots and lots of different industries, from forestry, fire, software, the railways, and I'm pretty excited to be part of a leading smart city. Our light on the hill is really to use tech and data to help us enable an intuitive city. So sort of thinking beyond the smart city and thinking we want that city to morph and change to support the community as events happen, but also as community needs change. So for example, wouldn't it be great if we could automatically morph some of our little streets, which is what we're doing now, into outdoor dining to aid our recovery and reactivation of the city. So we'd like to eventually use tech and IoT and other emerging technology to do that. What does 5G mean in terms of data for us? We're pretty excited about 5G, to be honest. We know that our real-time data will be able to increase, and we also know that that speed will increase, and that speed will increase in both directions. But where we really see big developments from the 4G to 5G because of that speed and the amount of data will be in the data sharing. A lot of people think that the City of Melbourne runs everything in the streets of the city, but it is actually a real collaborative approach with other asset owners and other interested parties in the city. So, for example, we work really closely with Yarra Trams. Do we share data well with Yarra Trams now? Not really. We work really closely with the Department of Transport. Do we share data well? Not really. 5G will actually force us to improve that data sharing, data standards, data privacy, all of that relationship and entity management of managing an intuitive city. That 5G data will help us do.
Catherine, thanks for that, and indeed for all my guests, thank you for those introductions. I would like to, well, firstly, what I'd like to say in observation there, of course, and for our audience, of course, we've got some diversity in sectors and views that we've got on this panel, and of course, we've certainly got a level of independence, you know, with academia, and also Nicole that certainly brings not saying that not all the panel are independent, but Nicole certainly brings a sort of a slice view to this agenda. I'd like to start with a really provocative question, if I can, and I'm going to open this to the entire panel. You know, when I reflect on just a selection of those points that Jason Romney made in his opening, of course, you know, it's hard not to sort of think, wow, you know, like sign me up. You know, this is something that is going to be fundamentally of benefit and value to so many different stakeholders. So my question is, again, open to anyone, who doesn't win with 5G and data? Who doesn't win? Is there a stakeholder group or a part of our ecosystem that maybe we don't have well represented, maybe that doesn't have a voice at the table? I'd just like to start. I'd like to start there, because our view is that if our most vulnerable and those that don't have a voice or an interest aren't fully engaged, you know, how sort of how beneficial can we really sort of make this agenda? Does anyone want to tackle that one? Who doesn't win with data and 5G? Nicole.
Look, I'll just get the conversation going with my understanding of the community's understanding of 5G. I think that the community, the citizens that we serve, potentially don't understand what 5G is. They, much like they maybe don't understand the difference between the operating system in their devices, or the difference between, you know, their iPhone 2 and their, you know, an iPhone 10 or whatever, right? They don't necessarily understand the difference between this technology and the one that came before it, and the implications that it might have for their data and how it's used. And I think there's a real opportunity perhaps to push some comms out from our cities where we're thinking about using 5G as our enabler, that perhaps we let our citizens know why this is better and how it improves things for them in terms of their relationship with the city, or the relationship between their data and outcomes for them as part of a larger community. So I'll just start off with that I think maybe there's a knowledge gap with our citizens that we could address as part of our 5G initiatives.
It is an interesting one, Nicole, because whilst all of us online, and probably the majority of our audience are generally familiar with 5G, we're enthusiasts to an extent when it comes to technology and data and the good advancements that it can make. My interpretation at the moment is the real sort of interface with 5G is at that customer level. You know, when we started seeing, you know, our telecommunications providers, you know, it must have been last year the advertising started coming, and it's at a handset level, you know. So it's a really interesting agenda that one of the one of the first sort of waves of engagement in this groundbreaking technology is with the consumer, the customer, the people out there. Yet it's got such a full technical agenda that, as you say, maybe not everyone fully understands. So thanks for kicking us off. Was there anyone else that wanted to attempt to sort of touch that around the sides, Jason, and then we'll go to Chris, and then Robert? Okay, we'll go through the panel. That's all right. Over to you first, Jason.
Thanks, Adam. Obviously, the homeless living rough in the streets, people living on the borderline of poverty, will struggle to derive advantage from some of these innovations. And I hope we're not moving into a world where you'll buy augmented reality glasses that, in combination with artificial intelligence, are so smart they can actually write things out of what you see as you walk down the street, so you don't even see the homeless people. I mean, that's a potential direction augmented reality could go in. But IoT and 5G city data is also about making data-driven decisions, knowing the condition or status of things that are going on around the city. And so my hope is that the data will set us free. The data will force us to confront those issues of poverty or homelessness, and that, you know, the technology will go arms locked with the sensibility and culture of the city, so that when those things are married, we don't ignore those problems and the people who aren't benefiting from all the great whiz-bang technology, and we all go forward together as a community.
Yeah, Jason, thanks for those comments. Chris, you want to add to that, and then we'll go to Robert?
Yeah, yes, thanks, Adam. Look, I think the call out here is that there's an awareness gap, and we've really got to face this. We all know this stuff, we understand it, we live it. A couple of things. The federal government commissioned a 5G inquiry. It ran for the bulk of the last half of 19 and into this year. It's reported, and of its 14 recommendations, several were going to this issue. We need to bring the community with us. We need to develop a narrative that they can understand, and that's fundamentally non-techie. There's some market research that's just been done into attitudes to 5G, and not surprisingly, there's at one end there's a group of people that say, I want it tomorrow and I want it as much of it as you can muster. Give it to me now. The other end, I don't want any of it, take it away, I think it's bad. In the middle, there's a big chunk of people who don't give a stuff. They're not interested in it, they're not technically minded, they're not technology minded, and yet they are the very people that are going to benefit hugely from the deployment and use of this technology. We've got to get into that awareness debate in a much more solid way. And of course, to the people who don't win, there's a great group of people out there who are very scared of technology. They're scared of what it's going to do to their employment. They're scared what it's going to do for their kids' employment. They worry about robots. They worry about AI, etc. So we've got to demystify this and get a narrative that people can be comfortable with, and that's a big challenge.
Yeah. Chris, thank you for those comments. Robert, what would you like to share on this topic?
Yeah, I think there are two groups of losers here. One is if you don't want it. I think the thing about 5G is that it's enabling so much technology where we're not in a position to do right now. We don't have the opportunity because 5G is going to provide so much data. We've had a lot of examples given out by the panel here already this morning, so I won't hang on them. But if we don't want that, then those people are going to lose out because they're not going to have a choice. And whether we like it or not, they're not going to have a choice. So I think opting out will be a big issue. And the other one is when we lose it. So unfortunately, with technology comes and because we're in the world of keeping everything running, we obviously, whenever we see an outage or a failure somewhere along the line, when technology fails, we're all impacted. There was certainly for a supermarket last week, they dropped their payment methods and the whole nation was not able to transact. And that's just symptomatic of what happens when technology fails. And the more that we depend on technology, then the bigger the impact when we lose it. And even though we build in as much resilience and design to be fail-safe, unfortunately, there still happens to be these events, and then everybody comes back and says, well, didn't you think of that? Well, you didn't actually think that these 3 storms are all going to converge on one city and drop the whole network system. So I think those are 2 big losers from my perspective.
Thanks, Robert. Can I turn the conversation now to the quantity of data, not speed at the moment, but just quantity, okay? 5G is going to potentially just deliver more data. And I don't see any research anywhere from what I've seen that suggests otherwise. At the best of times, more data doesn't necessarily equal better, okay? We've got examples right now, and we have for many years, where we've had mountains of data, but just haven't unlocked the value of it or really converted it into intelligence or insights so that we can make better decisions. So more data is not always better. What is 5G going to do to that situation? Is it just going to bring more and more? It just adds to the potential problem or dilemma, or with 5G, somehow we're going to bring this higher level of data leadership and better decision making, and we will be more strategic? Or are we really saying that the first line of defense, the first wave, is going to be the consumer and the handset, and just doing more consumption of data through apps or otherwise? Does someone want to kick us off around this idea of more doesn't necessarily mean better, or does it with 5G? Jason.
Well, look, I really do think that higher and faster data traffic will bring lots of tangible opportunities. And I mean, in terms of economic prosperity, for example, I'm thinking about how cities that have a rich data traffic profile are going to pull in the entrepreneurs, the innovators, the people with the imagination and inventiveness to drive prosperity. And they'll be able to do that because they'll be able to, use 5G and all that facilitated data traffic to prototype new products using techniques like, 3D generative design, where you test many things quickly and arrive at the best design. And just being able to spin up a twin at any time, anywhere, to simulate and test your ideas on a collaborative footing is such a powerful catalyst for prosperity. And meanwhile, you've got the impact on the arts and tourism. I mean, this idea of being able to have multiple high definition video streams so that essentially someone can be in a lot of places at once, I think will transform tourism. You'll be able to enjoy the sports precinct of Melbourne, the arts precinct of Melbourne, a TED talk in the innovation precinct, simultaneously flipping between them. And that's going to create a whole lot of really significant new experiences that will drive tourism. And in the arts, taking live theatre or orchestra out of the theatres onto the streets, for example, and using some of the capabilities to convert music into colours or projecting data in city light shows and that kind of thing. There's tremendous potential there. And I think that if cities choose to go on that journey, they can really pull themselves out of the COVID malaise by differentiating and creating experiences that will be acknowledged worldwide and certainly by tourists as being something they are going to come and visit to drive the prosperity we're all looking for.
Jason, thanks for that. I suppose in some way, maybe benefits of more data outweighing the lack of unleashing what we do have, or having lagging capability. But let's come back to that. Anyone else interested in commenting on the quantity of data issue? Let's go to Graham, and then Catherine will come to you afterwards.
Yeah, we've done a fair bit of work on this idea that more data is not necessarily better. We do a lot of work with Telecommunications, a Christchurch-based company, do a lot of radio systems for first responders, supplying all around the world. So many of your radio systems in your cities would be manufactured by them. And the key for first responders is situational awareness. Now that it's what data you deliver where. It's not sending massive streams of data to every police officer, trying to respond to an emergency. So this kind of what you do with the data, how you filter it, how you deliver it to people in a meaningful way in maps or diagrams, whatever, rather than just giving them the raw feed. And so there's people have already mentioned a lot of the 5G have been enabled for AI, and that will allow a lot of filtering of the data to extract the bits that are important and suppress the bits that aren't. Sort of distributed processing, edge processing in particular. For example, if you're thinking about a citywide security system with hundreds of cameras, each capable of streaming high-def video, you actually don't want all that video necessarily delivered back to a command center or a control center, whatever. You want some edge processing to only deliver the video that's interesting, look at the exceptions, look at the things that might be of concern, track potentially a suspect person through multiple points of view, and do this all and just present the result to the people that can use it. So yeah, more data is good as long as you use it in sensible ways. It's the type of data and what you do with it and how you process it.
Yeah, okay. Catherine, you had some views on this one you wanted to share?
Yeah, so regardless of 5G, we're not interested in data unless it's creating some sort of value. So it's that value creation for us. It's expensive to collect, manage, maintain, even if, with advancements in edge compute and AI, it's still going to be expensive. You'll still need people to ensure that there is quality of data and it's maintained. It's seen as an asset by the city, but we also focus on privacy. So it needs to create value for us as a city, and it needs to protect our community's privacy. And value isn't related to financial value only. It's time, efficiency, risk mitigation, community benefit. We measure value in lots and lots of different ways, but we don't generate data that is invaluable.
Nicole, you were waving there for a moment. I don't know if you were just saying hello or you wanted to make a comment about this, about the quantity of data, but are you feeling nervous? Are you excited? What are your views?
Look, as a privacy professional, remember I was saying before that, while I don't like to be the handbrake to happiness, I am definitely a voice of reason when it comes to data and data quantity. So our privacy laws require of our cities as well as our industry bodies that we only collect the data that we need to serve a particular purpose. So before we go about on a data journey, whatever it's for, we need to know what our purpose is and we need to know what data will fill that purpose. So it's not sufficient from the privacy law perspective to collect data simply because it's expedient or it's merely useful. In fact, it can be dangerous for a city or an industry player to collect too much data, because once you have it, you have to then manage it in accordance with the privacy law for the extent of its life cycle. So it's not just about the having it, it's about ensuring that it's not misused, that there's not a degree of function creep associated with it, that it's not disclosed to someone who doesn't need to have it, that it's secured in accordance with the privacy principles. I mean, that's fairly big. That includes protecting that data from a breach and then following up on a breach if one occurs. And then finally, that it's destroyed properly and securely. All of those things don't have to be done if you don't have the data in the first place. So, you know, my view as a privacy professional is know what you need the data for at the outset before you ingest it.
Thanks, Nicole. Chris, I'm going to come to you in a moment. I know you put up your hand. Nicole, as I was coming into going through the Brisbane CBD, I think just last weekend, just near the RNA Showgrounds, a huge big billboard, the latest iPhone 12 has been released. And it was a very simple, very elegant piece of advertising, as we know from iPhone. It had an image of the iPhone, the handset. It was a black background, and all that it said in white writing was privacy, full stop. This is iPhone, full stop. Certainly very interesting messaging now starting to come through. But let's come back to that a little bit later. Chris, your comment here?
Just a quick one, Adam. I mean, I think the reality is there is going to be more data. There's going to be lots more data. The key is how we manage it. And the key bolt hole here for 5G is that all the characteristics of 5G give us an opportunity to manage it better and to shape delivery of data analytics through network slicing in a way that's useful to a much broader range of end customers, be they industry or consumers.
Thanks, Chris. Robert, what would you like to say here?
I just want to take another use case because we talked about what 5G does. It enables this enabler of allowing data to be processed in different localities. So Australia and New Zealand, they have a lot of food processing plants that are dotted out, obviously right out into the country, and these are becoming ever more sophisticated. You know, we're seeing IoT popping up in these areas, and there's a lot of data crunching, and that data crunching needs to be pulled back into a central resource. I mean, mining is another good application where they may not have good communications between the two areas, but within a relatively large area, you can run up a small 5G network that will allow big data, big crunching to take place at those kind of localities. So yes, there'll be more data, but what 5G does is it enables you to deal with that data where you want it, rather than it being centralized and processed. You can spread it on what we call a hybrid, either a hybrid cloud or a hybrid IT networking and computing system.
Thanks, Robert. I'd like to talk about use cases or sectors for a moment. Data61, CSIRO, Australia's sort of innovation agency, published a report in 2018 identifying that there's a $315 billion dividend opportunity for Australia, our nation, here through digital transformation. It identifies 8 high growth, high potential opportunities, and far outweighing the 8 there. So we've got precision healthcare, digital agriculture, data-driven urban management, cyber physical security, supply chain integrity, proactive government, legal informatics, and smart exploration and production. Precision healthcare is by far at the top of the table there. A $30 to $50 billion export market opportunity and value add. And of course, healthcare touches on many of us. And of course, in 2020, we've certainly seen some sort of digital innovation around that, even if we were forced into it. I'd like to sort of get each of your views on what your, I don't want to say pet industry or sector, but is there a particular sector or industry or part of our community and what we do that particularly from your perspective has a significant opportunity to change lives? So through the lens of that statement, changing people's lives, Is there a particular sector? Is it tourism? Is it minerals? Is it healthcare? Is it better government decision making? I'd like a quick response from each of the panelists, if I may. Graham, let's start with you. Is there a particular sector or industry that you think really has the opportunity to sort of thrive here?
Oh, look, there's so many. I mean, touching upon our experience, you know, as I said, we do a lot of work with first responders, and there's a real convergence there, you know, going from the traditional narrowband radio systems to systems whereby the frontline responders actually don't care what radio they've got hanging off their belt, whatever. They just push a button and they get communications, and they also get data that they didn't get before, so that they can be in the field and they can get the information rather than having to sort of, you know, write things down in their notebook and go back to the station to collate reports and the like. So yeah, so there's this real convergence of the traditional narrowband radios that they're familiar with, and they actually, it's quite sticky. They like having the lapel mic they can push a button on. They don't want to move to a phone they've got to pull out of their pocket and start swiping at, particularly if they're wearing gloves. They like that form factor, but they don't really care what communication is behind it. They push the button and they get through. So there's a lot of innovation there about convergence of different ICT technologies there.
Thanks, Graham. Robert, what about you?
Well, generally it's sort of accepted that transportation is the real big winner on all of this, but I'm not going to focus on that one because one of the things which I think is somewhat ironic is that I'm going to pick the healthcare one as well, because I think it actually helps a lot of people, but it would be really good if people stop burning down 5G, 4G, 3G towers because they think it's going to cause cancer, because the impact for people that are working on in the healthcare area, the first responders, anything to do, I mean, you lose that mobile network, and it creates a much larger problem than the spurious comments that it's actually got some health deficiencies associated with 5G.
Yeah,
Robert,
okay.
I think it's more than cancer. It's supposed to cause COVID-19, isn't it?
Oh yeah, that's the other one. Yeah, that's what Facebook said. Yes.
That's right. That's right. Catherine Hill.
And
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Gates is responsible for all of that. So
That's right. Catherine Hill, let's go to you. What are your views on this, the real sector or industry that really gets a dividend?
We've sort of divided it up in our trying to think forwardly around when there is a fair maturity in the 5G rollout, that from an urban citizen's perspective, certainly health, precision healthcare, remote surgery is super exciting, and some of the labs in RMIT and Melbourne University are already working in that space. The other thing that we're seeing that's quite exciting is educational services being offered remotely, completely differently using 5G. So that's from an urban citizen perspective. But for us, looking at it as life in the city, totally enhanced road safety, coming back to safety and health, we really see some potential huge opportunities for traffic management, and that's all kinds of traffic in the city. And then from an entertainment perspective, which is certainly not health and safety, but that real live action experience, which talks to the same opportunities around educational services, that would be exciting. Melbourne loves entertainment, Melbourne loves sport, so we could certainly drive some very interesting use cases there.
Thanks, Catherine. Jason Romney, your response to this one?
Well, Adam, I'd have to opt for transport. I mean, Juniper says that 5G-based IoT solutions by 2024 will be worth globally about $8 billion, and it says transport and automotive are 70% of that. And in Australia, you know, you've got to remember that we have, I think it's 1,200 road deaths and about 30,000 injuries requiring hospitalization every year. So if that 1 millisecond latency of 5G can even improve that by 1%, it's really moving the needle on the dial in a very powerful way. And I think, you know, obviously 5G and the data it facilitates contributes to the take-up of new things in the transport area, like cooperative intelligent transport systems, CITS. And those are very significant in the context of what is essentially, you know, a 5G disruption of the transport sector. It's a $200 billion sector, by the way. So, you know, it's going to make a big difference. And I think cities have a great opportunity to partner with businesses on that. Maybe clip the ticket and create some new business models there as well. So it's saving lives, preventing deaths, and creating new opportunities in a massive market.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Chris, you know, this lens of changing people's lives, where do you think it sort of presents a great opportunity sector, industry-wise?
In Australia, Adam, I'm very on song with the transport and logistics and health. But you know, from a global, looking at globally and our position in global trade, particularly in our region, the precision and the application in agriculture is also big for me. We've got to somehow produce 70% more food in this on this planet by 2050. So our productivity levels in ag are huge, and Australia's just got a great opportunity to leverage our skills and our capacity there. Not so much a smart city deal, but you know, it's a big call for us.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Chris. Nicole, what about you on this question?
Oh, look, I'm really a fan of 5G in terms of enabling our emergency management services to a greater extent, as well as that transport and mobility component. So if you think about citizens and their right to be safe, right? Safe in their homes and to move about their cities easily and quickly, and if they have accessibility issues, to have those managed, or to even understand where their opportunities are to, you know, to be collected by transport that's suitable in their circumstance. I really think that 5G will move that kind of mobility as a service component of our cities into a new and exciting space. And then that emergency management, you know, that fire and flood response in particular, I think we'll see some really great results out of that.
Okay, Nicole, don't push the mute button for a moment. I want to start with you with this next round of questions. I want us to do a quick reflection on 2020 and the health pandemic and everything that came with that. We've seen significant uptake in terms of work from home and everyone being connected, schooling on all different types of platforms. You know, it was a different year. 2020 was a different year when it came to us being connected, and obviously with that, the data that flowed through the pipe, so to speak. Does 2020 and all that happened changed any particular views? I'm going to ask each of you to respond to this. Does 2020 change your views around 5G, good, bad, or otherwise? Nicole?
So from a privacy perspective, I don't see 5G as being much different than anything else that's new and innovative that either enables the collection, use, and distribution of data, or is something to do with merging the data with the data to come up with some outcome for the community. All of these things, all of these technologies, from my perspective, have privacy issues that are inherent with them, but they also offer great opportunities to solve those issues. So from my perspective, I see 5G as maybe a conversation starter around making better decisions in relation to data and building privacy into our projects or our initiatives from the outset, as opposed to bolting it on later when we think of it, or when someone complains, when someone asks a difficult or a tricky question. Also, I think that 5G might actually be the catalyst for us to rethink some of our regulation around privacy. So right now, we see privacy as the regulation is technology neutral, right? It's intended to be so that decisions are made based on core principles of things like accountability and transparency and purpose specification. And I think that's great, but sometimes those principles don't allow us to meaningfully engage with the technology that we need to engage with so that we can serve our communities. So I do think that there may be a catalyst here for our governments to say, okay, maybe we need to expand our regulatory environment to one that understands technology and particular types of technology. You know, if an example of a technology, for example, that seems to be moving into that space now where we might need to regulate more is our closed circuit television cameras. And I know that that's not necessarily a 5G issue, although the data that moves, you know, between, you know, cameras in our cities will be enabled by 5G. But CCTV and the issue of facial recognition, these are really hot topics from a privacy perspective, and they're not dealt with very well with our technology neutral laws. So I do see that there are some changes coming. I don't think necessarily that 5G will be an impact space. More, I think that all the discussions about what happens to data, how it moves, who it goes to, whether it's from the personal realm or the public realm, I think there's a catalyst for change here. I'm excited to see what happens.
Okay. Chris, 2020, has it changed anything in your mind around 5G and data?
Absolutely, it has. You know, you couldn't have shone a brighter light on the need for connectivity, and that is going to do two things in my view. It's going to accelerate agendas. It's going to inject a sense of urgency as we try to work our way through the economic and social implications of what's just happened around the world, but, you know, for us in Australia. So I think 5G will accelerate. I think the attitude of governments will shift with this as they look to a digital transformational recovery approach. And look, the opportunities are endless. You can re-energise manufacturing in this country. You can do better in our core sectors, mining, agriculture, and so on. So it really is going to be a shaping year, 2020, and we'll live with implications this for decades.
Yeah, okay. Jason Romney, your view on 2020?
Well, in relation to the COVID issues that everyone's been wrestling with, we've certainly changed our focus to think a lot more about how smart buildings with a digital twin of the building, for example, can help building owners, building managers deal with the problems of COVID. And the digital twins that we've got now for buildings, we've digitized and created twins for all the Telstra offices across the country, for example, in the main cities, are all set up to ensure that COVID thresholds around density of occupation of floors are not exceeded, and you can tell when your desk has been cleaned, so you're comfortable to sit at the desk. You know, there are lots of ways that COVID is being addressed through better visibility of the status of all the assets around the building. And so that's in a sort of micro sense. And then stepping back and looking at the macro sense of the whole city, we've been looking a lot at integrated, intelligent sort of smart city management platforms that bring all the different inputs that help a city understand what's happening around COVID. You know, are people waiting in a queue to go into a restaurant standing too close? Are they not wearing their masks? Are there behaviours that might be a menace to people in terms of, you know, bad COVID protocol? And giving the opportunity to intervene to the city to address those things across that macro environment, and federating those two digital twins into a seamless understanding, whether it's in a building or a precinct or the entire city, is, I think, of growing significance. So COVID has really catalyzed a great deal of thinking about what problems we should prioritize to solve, and in partnership with cities, We're looking to make a difference to the economic recovery in particular, drawing people back in, getting the CBD repopulated and the economy restarted.
Thanks, Jason. Graham, what about you? Does 2020 and the health pandemic change any views or opportunities with respect to 5G and data?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't fundamentally change what I understood 5G to be, but it really highlights the potential. You know, as Chris mentioned, you know, this ubiquitous connectivity. As a university, with, you know, obviously a lot of teaching, we had to move university off campus over one weekend. A decision was made on Friday afternoon. We paused lectures on the Monday. Tuesday, we reopened as a complete online campus. And we delivered all of the rest of first semester. This is around mid-March, so we delivered all the rest of first semester, all lectures, tutorials, labs, assessment items, exams, all delivered online. You know, when you reflect, that is a pretty phenomenal seismic change that happened so quickly, and it was through the connectivity. You know, furthermore, I have a bit of a personal perspective on this because in the middle of this, I had a family emergency. I had to return back to Sydney, and so I was lecturing into my courses here in Canterbury, in Christchurch, from my parents' house in Sydney. You know, that's amazing that you can do that, right? And furthermore, when I had to return to New Zealand and sitting in managed isolation in a hotel in Auckland, I continued doing that. So I had connectivity throughout, and that really, you know, is just so powerful, having that connectivity everywhere.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. Robert, what about you? Views on this one? COVID 2020?
Yeah. 5G, similar to Graham, to be frank with you, you know, it actually doesn't change anything. To me, it's the next platform, it's the next vehicle for enablement of our next branch into technology. And we had similar experiences. You know, our business also had to make the decision over a weekend to go from an office-based business to a work-from-home business very, very quickly, and many of our customers were in the same situation. I guess we had a couple of interesting components associated with how the business had to support because we're about keeping everybody running. You know, suddenly we had situations whereby we were needing passes for allowing our service engineers to get to sites. We had companies where they said, no, nobody's allowed to go into the data center because they didn't want to lose their staff. But on the other hand, they also needed to make sure that the data center kept running. So it did introduce a number of facets. I think the March period was really interesting, I think is probably the best way of putting it, on how we transitioned from one complete business structure to a new business structure. But in terms of whether 5G, my interpretation of 5G, it'll just enable us to do more, quicker, better, faster, as we've talked about many a time.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Robert. Catherine, last round for this question. Your views on this one?
Yeah, I agree. It hasn't really changed views on 5G. I don't think it's enabled the community to have a better understanding of 5G, even though everyone is focused on connectivity. I couldn't agree more with what Nicole said. I really hope 5G does drive and accelerate the regulation around privacy, especially. What we've done in the city is we've put together a future city task force, and out of that, on the City of Melbourne website, is a reactivation and recovery plan. And during that process, we engaged really heavily with the community on what their requirements were for data and information during COVID. And there's some really great findings in there. The first one was the concern about the digital divide, and how do we solve for that as a city. And the second is that there was a real need expressed that the community wants to be involved. So we know that 5G will help us with some of our efficiencies, but we also now want to have a deeper engagement with our community around what their data needs are to bring it back to data. And we're planning to do quite a bit of work on that this year and really get the community much more deeply involved than they have been before around that data and the use of emerging technology.
Catherine, I might come straight back to you. The next question I wanted to get some thoughts on were a little bit related to that. And it'll be great to sort of keep a watching brief on the work that you do there. My kind of next question was going to be around what are the questions, not the questions, what are the conditions that we feel we're yet to put in place to capitalize, to create the value from this? What are sort of some of those areas, those gaps, and things we still need to do? We've discussed all these amazing things about how 5G and the data it brings is going to change our lives. What conditions do we need to put in place to make sure that happens? Are there any sort of hunches or ideas you've got before you go into this sort of work that you're going to do, or more broadly, things that are still left to be done?
We know that we need to solve the privacy issue. We foresee that video analytics is with edge compute is such an amazing potential for us to understand in near real time what's happening in the city. The privacy regulation at the moment isn't based, exactly what Nicole said before, much more eloquently than I can, isn't based around the technology, and we need it too. Now, we have a real trusted brand with our community, but we don't want to just rely on that. For example, we want it to be really clear around trust and ethics about how we're using video, CCTV footage essentially, and how we are not planning to ever take away anyone's privacy and instead use the analytics from that. But how do we regulate and ensure that that happens all of the time? You know, when I leave council or when our team isn't active at council, how do we continue that assurance, and how do we make sure that as data is matched with other data, that we don't jeopardize that privacy, for example? So privacy regulation, I think, is something that we need to solve because it doesn't go far enough. We also are very active in creating public-private partnerships through our test beds. We want to sort of take that to the next level. But we also foresee that with the advent of more and more data and the ability to really manage and understand in real time what's happening in the urban realm, that there really needs to be an improvement in data sharing, those data platforms, and because what we'd really like to see is a real common operating picture for the state. And we can lead, but, you know, as much as we can, but it's a real state-based issue, I think. New South Wales are doing a great job in this area, by the way, because we don't want what we produce to stop at the municipality boundary. We want it to be available across the state, of course, not just within the city of Melbourne. So, for example, if there's an issue on a tram, that issue doesn't stop at the city of Melbourne boundary, right? How does that data and that real-time information get managed and in a common operating environment for the whole of Greater Melbourne, for example, for that whole tram network?
Catherine, thanks for that. For our audience who are listening in, we've got 14 minutes left. Really encourage our audience to pop any questions that they might have into the questions box. Back to our panel of guests. Share with us more on those conditions that we're yet to put in place to realise the value and the potential from data and 5G. Who else wants to contribute to this one? What are some of those pieces that need to be put into place? Jason?
Well, look, Adam, I think cities need to just keep pushing, regardless of all the COVID distractions and so on, to galvanize their data into a form that's, you know, accessible and secure and structured and empowering and trusted and all the things we want and know that data has to be useful to digital twins and 5G use cases like we've been discussing. And in parallel, of course, they need to not give up and keep pushing to have those data policies that we've heard about, and adopting something like a data exchange platform so that they can combine lots of data pools for the actionable insights that are going to make a real difference to prosperity going forward. And, you know, putting data at the center of decision making is something which yields so many benefits, including in terms of making the city administration and government more transparent and responsive and accountable. And I think that's going to make a big difference to the outcomes that we're able to achieve going forward. And I guess finally, a condition that strikes me as a good one would be to just come and visit our 5G Innovation Centre, where, you know, all of these use cases are actually, or many of them, are running in a form where you can kick the tires, see what's possible, and get that benefit in thinking about your own plans.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jason. Nicole, yes, your views here.
So, look, I think in the absence of hard and fast rules around what we do with 5G or with any other technology for that matter, I think we need to go back to first principles and always focus on something called privacy by design. So whatever it is we intend to do that will leverage 5G in order to achieve our outcome, right? We need to make sure that that project is designed from end to end with privacy in mind. And I think then that allows us to address this issue where we've got a regulation gap, at least then from a policy and process point of view, we are taking the right steps, both strategically and in terms of project management, to make sure that from end to end, personal information of our community is being managed appropriately, and that data-driven decisions are being made on the basis of the right data at the right time for the right purpose. So this idea of privacy by design, I think, is key. The other thing I think is a gap right now is our understanding of what function creep could mean from the perspective of the community. So the example that Catherine used before about data analytics from our CCTV cameras, that is one of the main purposes most of the cities sought that particular technology when they were receiving the city deal funding, right? They sought the cameras so that they could make better data-driven decisions about things that matter in their community, whether it's, you know, road safety or use of park spaces, or whether or not people are speeding when they shouldn't be, or what our pedestrian traffic is doing. I mean, these are all really relevant, important things for our cities. What our community doesn't want, though, is to see that facial recognition capability turned on unless there is a relevant and specific law enforcement purpose. And oftentimes, it's hard for cities when they've got the technology there and they've got the potential to use particular data for a different purpose to just say, oh, look, we can do it, it's expedient, it's easy this way. If you don't jump through the right hoops, though, you get into this challenge of function creep, which is this widening of the use of a particular technology in a way that may be considered privacy invasive from the perspective of the community. So turning on facial recognition for your data analytics projects is function creep as opposed to fulfilling a particular law enforcement purpose. And yeah, I think Graham's got a comment too, so I'll just, I'll hop.
Thanks, Nicole. Graham, yes, you were indicating
you
want to share on this.
Another important condition is expertise and training. People have got to understand these new data tools, what it can do for them. For example, here we recently started a master's in data science, and it's quite different to a traditional computer science degree. We're not taking computer science professionals, we're taking domain experts. They might be conservationists, they might be, you know, water asset managers, they might be health professionals, and we're training them on how to use data, how to use data tools in order to apply it to their, the everyday job. I think that's a very important condition. And then, some other points, Jason already mentioned standards. There's still a bit of work to tidy up the standards, say data interconnectivity, so systems can speak to each other. In the specific case of autonomous vehicles, there's a bit of a battle of standards on connected intelligent transportation systems. In New Zealand, for example, we're still waiting on the spectrum management to allocate the appropriate spectrum to assist in that area. So there's a bunch of other things to tidy up so that we can take maximum advantage of this data.
Yeah. Okay. We've got a couple of comments in the question box there from Mark. There's a question there. I think it might have been directed to you, Graham, from saying your opening comment there mentioned 1 million devices interconnected in some pretty sort of pretty high density, geography-wise. Is there anything around the rate of that growth or the phases or timing? Is that like an endpoint in 2050? Is there anything more sort of granular around that stat?
No, that's actually comes out of standard specifications. That was a requirement when they were defining the requirements of 5G. If I recall it correctly, it's something like 10 to the 6 interconnected devices per square kilometre. And similar sorts of numbers are coming, or bigger numbers are coming out in 6G, right? And this is a scary number, but you've got to see that everything will be connected to the internet in some sense. All your street lights will just automatically come with wireless connectivity. Whether you actually use it or not might be a different matter, but it'll become so cheap, it'll just be built into everything. So that's why the standard is built to be future-proof, so that you can have that degree of interconnectivity.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for clarifying, Graham. So look, last kind of round of views, if I can invite them. And what's going through my head? Let me sort of ramble for a moment here. And I'll speak to Australia, Graham. I can't speak to necessarily what's happening in New Zealand, but in Chris's opening statement, he referred to the parliamentary inquiry on 5G, and there was a bit of a national thing that played out there, and concerns and questions and recommendations came forward. We know that the Australian government, wants to accelerate Australia's leadership when it comes to, building a digital economy. We see particular advances and investments over there from, Department of Home Affairs and cyber and security and big buckets of money. We see at a state level, Minister Dominello doing great things. We see in Western Sydney city deals, sort of little pockets of programs, initiatives, budgets around 5G and accelerating that. And I step back and I ask myself, where's Australia's 5G plan? What's the plan here? And, with telecommunications, a lot of the time, it's sort of the market, right? The market kind of works at the pace that the market needs. My question, coming around to my question, where is your headspace at with respect to a plan around 5G to help us realize all of the good things that we've been talking about today? I mean, it is just irresistible 5G now, based on what we've been saying today. What's the plan of realizing that? Or do we just let the system do what the system wants to do? Catherine and Melbourne will do their 5G thing, and Jason, Telstra will go off and do what you do, and Graham will research whatever he wants to, and Robert will sell based on whatever it is, and Nicole will get a call when there's privacy concerns, and Chris, you'll represent that cacophony of sort of, industry goodness that's happening. Am I being too aspirational to think that maybe a plan could really be of value here? And anyone want to comment or sort of react to that? Yes, Chris.
look, plans of this nature are good in practice, good in theory, but I'm not sure they work that well in practice. What we've said to government is there are underlying things that you need to do to clear the way, if you like, to remove barriers, to allow the opportunities to flow. I can remember a couple of conversations in the industry portfolio where there was a very strong view that the more we sought government engagement, the slower the process would be, and the process was accelerating all the time. So we've said to government, please take a policy position and then go to the regulatory settings that are going to enable 5G, which means that you have to deal with 5G relevant regulation in every portfolio because it's economy-wide. Get those settings right, remove barriers, and then let the market, which is moving at such breakneck speed with innovation and opportunity, let that run. To try and box all of that, ring fence it in a strategy, it'd be out of date the moment you published it, and it'd take you a year and a half to write the thing. I think it's the macro pieces that have got to be dealt with by government, and then let industry and the partners they will form in the verticals push the innovation agenda.
Yeah, okay. I appreciate you jumping off there with that, Chris. Jason, and what I'd ask is if anyone is in significant disagreement with Chris, I'd be keen to get a final view. But about a minute to go. Yes, Jason.
Oh, just quickly, Adam. I think there is a de facto plan from something like, say, the federal and state funding and the way they shape eligibility, stimulating the 5G players in the marketplace to form new partnerships and collaborations between, say, industry and academia and all the different stakeholders in the ecosystem. And I think Minister Dominello's requirement of, say, a smart digital component in infrastructure for projects above a certain threshold forces, you know, the digital side of things center stage and to be thought through and implemented in the infrastructure we roll out. And that's an example of where the plan, even if we don't have a super explicit, crisp one, is nonetheless there working behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. Friends, we're at time. It's been a hoot. We've covered a lot of territory. I think there's some very much in there some common optimism and opportunities that come with 5G and the data world, the new data world that we'll be experiencing. So thank you so much. So Robert, Graham, Catherine, Chris, and Nicole, and Jason, thanks so much for joining us today. And Jason also representing Telstra, thank you for sponsoring the session today. It's been great to have you and the rest of the guests join us to share their views. Thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
And for our audience, thank you for joining us and dialing in. As I mentioned, the video will be available on YouTube this time tomorrow. That's about it here from the SCC HQ for our last data dialogue of 2020. We hope you've enjoyed it. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
you too.
Have fun.
Thanks for meeting you all virtually.